Hello, all. With recent news about God of War spin-offs and things like that, I wanted to throw my hat in the ring and talk about not just the recent news or recent developments, but some of what we as fans have been wanting, or just myself. Maybe you mirror some of my beliefs, maybe you don't. But at the end of the day, I'd like to hear yours. So after the video's over, please leave that in the comment section down below what your ideal next God of War project would be, because that is the topic of today's video. What's next? So recently we heard about them doing somewhat of a spin-off game revolving around Kratos' wife, and there have been pretty mixed reviews about it, most of them being negative, for the main reason that God of War has been a Kratos dominant franchise since it began. And any God of War without Kratos in it or without Kratos leading it kind of breaks the fandom. I believe it was somewhat disingenuous to assume that the only reasoning was the misogyny. And again, not dismissing it. For some people, that was their reason. They don't want a female led game. It's the quote unquote woke stuff that's going on these days. But no, 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 no. Um, I believe that at certain times we would have done great with female characters, but the issue isn't that there's a female playable character or not, it's when that female playable character is playable. See, temporary sections of a God of War game where you play as another character are fine. In fact, I believe it was God of War Ascension where we almost got Artemis as playable, and it was somewhat of a co-op opportunity. I believe it was going to be two players where one of you would play as Kratos and the other as Artemis, or even possibly if they had some levels where you go as only Artemis. That would have been great. There's a part of me that wishes that we got to see that, but that works because we still get Kratos. Kratos is the brand itself. God of War without Kratos kind of spoils itself. Now, I personally had a different issue with it. It was unrelated to whether or not it would be good because I trust the developers of God of War. Everything that they put out has been a masterpiece. So I don't doubt the fact that it would have been good or that it would have been fun to play. But my disappointment is that there are certain things that we've talked about for years, for decades, saying this is what we want, this is what we want. And that keeps not happening. And that's the disappointing part of being a God of War fan. So, we've been saying God of War Egypt, God of War Egypt, God of War Egypt since the early 2000s when God of War first came out. We're like, oh, he's battling the gods. Oh, we'd love to see him go pantheon to pantheon. Ooh, Egypt next, please. Egypt next, please. And they went Norse. And I remember the disappointment when I found out that he wasn't going to Egypt. Of course, the Norse saga has been a masterpiece. Again, it's not an issue of whether or not they can make something great. It's about, are we actually getting what we want? And that's the bigger thing. Are we actually getting what we want? And truthfully, no. So to talk about what we would want, that is so one of the things that I've heard about just being on the internet, being in comment sections over the last decade or so, God of War Egypt in whatever capacity, the next actual God of War thing in order to please the fans kind of needs to take place in Egypt for a fair amount of it. Not just a cutscene, not just a flashback, but a major portion of the next project kind of needs to be in Egypt because that's what we've been begging for. We'd love to see their take on some of the ancient Egyptian deities and monsters. Kratos fighting against Apep, Kratos versus Set, Kratos versus Sekhmet, Kratos versus Sobek. There's so many entities there that we've been begging to see since the early 2000s. So God of War Egypt is easy. Now, there are plenty of other, let's just say, pantheons that Kratos and his story could continue well in, especially now that he's transitioning out of the war god archetype. He's moving more so into the god of peace, the god of unity, the god of protection, rather than war, the great unifier. So I think just my ideas, right? And y'all can tell me if you think I'm insane, this sucks, or if you're like, wait a minute, he might be onto something. And that's what I would call God of War Odyssey, where we actually begin to see Kratos travel to these different regions. Of course, Kratos going to any other region now, he registers as a threat, even though we, the viewer, we, the player, know that he's a good guy, that he's not actually after it. But there's two destroyed civilizations in his wake. So the other pantheons have good reason to be a little fearful of him or be a little on edge about him. I wouldn't want to do something where Atreus gets kidnapped by another pantheon and now Kratos has to go and rescue him. I kind of think that's the whole purpose of how God of War recently ended, was Kratos not being an overbearing father and letting Atreus go out. That would kind of ruin that development if we immediately have to go rescue boy. Even if there's certain segments of the next game where you do play as Atreus and he's out doing something, even if there are some conflicts, let's keep Kratos and Atreus separate. I remember even the inclusion of the boy was somewhat problematic when the Norse saga began. Most of us found him annoying, and he grew on us in the second one. So in this God of War Odyssey idea that I have, he would be traveling to a few different regions. You know, either you can do 1 and 2, or you can do one DLC, maybe a second one that gives you reason to go do whatever else because you fed the fan base a little bit. You've actually given us what we wanted for a game plus a DLC or so. And in that, we might get a little bit of Egypt, a little bit of India. Because yes, I've heard a lot of people say they'd love to see Kratos's interaction with the Hindu deities, Kratos versus Shiva, Kratos interacting with Ganesh, Kratos versus Kartikeya, the gods of war. Then, of course, there's the Chinese pantheon. Now, this is one that I've wanted also, but after Egypt. Egypt first, China next, simply because of the legend of Sun Wukong. And instead of them clashing, that is another opportunity for co-op, where you can play as Sun Wukong and Kratos in the same game, and they're both tearing up the Chinese pantheon together. I find that much more thrilling than just the Kratos versus Sun Wukong. Sure, maybe give us one fight at the beginning, they become allies. Let's say they consider each other equals. And then they go off and wreak havoc in the Chinese pantheon. Maybe Sun Wukong travels with you in the Odyssey. Maybe that's how Odyssey works, is that there's a ally that's gained from each of these lands as he starts to build his caravan. So he has, you don't really need 5 or 6 Kratos level people on one team. You could have some weaker people. Maybe he is able to bridge the gap with Sindri. Sindri's, representing the Norse saga. Leave Tyr where he is. Or maybe have Tyr temporarily go on the Odyssey, but stop somewhere else because he's like, I haven't been here for a while. He stays in Egypt. He stays in India somewhere. And he's like, hey, I'm going to stay here. You continue. I have some other stuff I want to do. I'm vacationing here. I just needed a ride. Let's not even focus too much on Tyr. Maybe temporarily we can have a playable Tyr. But truthfully, I could see him picking up different allies from different regions that specialize in different magic. They're from different cultures. They know different things. They're useful in different ways. Maybe he has a shipwright that comes from Greece or Rome. Or he actually visits Rome and gets to meet the Roman counterparts. Might actually get to meet some of the deities that didn't make an appearance. We might actually get Artemis and Apollo, who never made an official God of War appearance. I find that much more fascinating then even the idea of him just going wreak havoc in these other lands, he's kind of turned over. He's not trying to be that anymore. So I think we'd be going backwards to make him destroy another civilization. Instead, we could see him in conflicts of trying to bring peace, maybe even bridging the gap, acting more so in a priestly type of role, going between different realms to get them to work together. Maybe we do get to Egypt, and Egypt and China aren't getting along. So you're trying to bridge the alliances between these different areas. So that's what I would call it. God of War Odyssey, and it's just him traveling by sea. We get some naval combat in a God of War game. Yeah. You get to customize the boat, you get to steer a little bit, maybe some sea creatures as you're going. I like the idea of that. Y'all tell me if y'all think I'm cooking or if you'll think I should never cook again. But these are just some of my ideas. Let me know yours in the comments down below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Are you interested in playing as Kratos' wife? Of course, that is something I didn't talk about too much. I did mention that I do believe they would do a good job at that. And that's just because of the lore that we got about her in the Norse saga, pretty much put her as an equal to Thor. So she wouldn't be weak. She wouldn't be a damsel in distress. You know, it wouldn't be kind of like Resident Evil that just came out where you're like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to stop playing Grace so I can go play Leon. I don't think it would be that. She would be the boss in that game, in that spinoff. So yeah, so tell me, what are your thoughts on the God of War spinoffs? Are you interested in it? Do you not like the idea of it? Is it Kratos only? Is there some wiggle room for some other playable characters? What are some gods? What are some regions that you'd like to see Kratos visit? That's all for this time. Y'all take care.